Welcome back to the Manager Podcast, where we explore leadership, ambition, and the invisible work women do to build extraordinary lives. Today's guest is someone who has spent years helping high-achieving women answer a question so many of us wrestle with. How do you build a big life without burning yourself out in the process? Joining me today is Cherylanne Skolnicki, founder of Brilliant Balance, a leadership coach, entrepreneur, and host of the Brilliant Balance podcast. Cherylanne spent years in corporate leadership roles before pivoting to build a coaching company dedicated to helping ambitious women create lives that feel as good on the inside as they look on the outside. Her work focuses on helping women manage the intersection of career, leadership, family, and personal fulfillment without feeling like they are constantly dropping the ball somewhere. And as many of you know, here on The Manage Her, we talk a lot about the invisible labor women carry, the mental load, the planning, the organizing, and how those skills can actually become leadership superpowers. Today, we're going to explore what balance really means for modern women, why so many high-achieving women still feel overwhelmed, lessons she's learned from interviewing hundreds of successful women, and what we're going to pull back the curtain on the business of podcasting. Cherylanne, welcome to the Manager Podcast. Yay.
I'm just delighted to be here. This will be so fun.
Well, I'd love to start with your story. What led you from corporate leadership into creating Brilliant Balance?
So it's such an important kind of part of my origin story, I think, is that I did spend 15 years working for Procter Gamble. Right out of college, I went to work for them as a total baby. And I really thought I was going to stay in a corporate career forever. I was a very diligent corporate ladder climber. And at some point, I think when I looked at the next few rungs up the ladder, I just didn't want to be there. I just was like, that is not the work that I really feel called to do. I don't feel like that's the difference I want to see in the world, the dent I want to make in the universe, so to speak. I was, full disclosure, working on like laundry detergent, and something about, how much does it really matter which brand you use? You have to care about that a whole lot to devote your career to that. So I started thinking about the problems I really wanted to solve, and most of them were centered in challenges that I was seeing women face, that either I was facing myself or had faced previously, or women around me were facing. And the first business that I felt called to start was in the health and wellness space, because so many of my peers were struggling with figuring out how to feed themselves well, their families well, how to fit in, fitness and movement. And I was really passionate about some of the transformation I'd seen in my own life and wanted to share it. And then one thing sort of led to another, where I think the scope of issues that I was passionate about and equipped to solve for women continued to expand until it became what is today Brilliant Balance.
That's amazing. It's always amazing to see how one thing leads to another with women. And so we kind of follow our heart and our passion and our purpose towards where we're supposed to be as we're evolving as human beings. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. It has 100% been my experience, but everyone thinks you have to have a perfect 10-year strategic plan. And I thought that, and it's just not true. It's just not true.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, my life has never been written in Sharpie. I always think I'm going to do one thing, and then it's like, maybe I'm going to pivot and do this instead.
Right.
But having like flexibility in your life will bring you happiness in the long run, being flexible with the changes that are going to come.
I agree completely.
Yeah. When you look back at that transition, was there a moment when you realized you wanted to help other women design their lives differently?
Yes. And I think that moment was when I realized that it was not about the food at all. Like, if you remember, the first business was about really helping women transform their own relationship with food, often a problematic relationship. And then there's so much shame around what we're feeding our families. And I think through my work to explore the why, to really get underneath, like, why is this such an issue, a persistent issue? Why is there so much shame around it? Right underneath the surface of that were all of the other things that they were carrying, right? Like, it wasn't a discipline issue. It wasn't a choice issue. It was much more foundational. And that was, I think, probably, I haven't really thought about it that way before, but that was probably the pivot to say, I think we're going to have to go a little deeper here.
I love it. I see that in my work too. I'm like, are we?
It's a symptom, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Is this a symptom of some sort of cultural conditioning that we have? Yes, it is. The word balance can sometimes feel like a myth. What does brilliant balance actually mean in practice?
Oh, this is my favorite question because I think sometimes I've tossed around the idea of just burning the whole brand to the ground because people hate the word balance so much. I think I really feel a sense of reclaiming that word because I think of balance as a dynamic practice, almost staying in balance, like core strength, right? The way like a ballerina would have core strength versus, equal slices of a pie chart, so to speak, or equally balanced sides of a scale. There's nothing static about balance in the life of a woman ever at any point in the life cycle. And I've thought a lot about sort of the cycle of a woman's life along what I think of as the complexity curve. And that complexity sort of increases steadily and peaks at a certain number of years where you're sort of carrying the maximum amount of career responsibilities, family responsibilities, household responsibilities, community responsibilities, right? We're just bearing a lot in these peak years before we start to re-edit our lives and sort of resettle on ourselves at some point. Those peak years are really where brilliant balance principles apply. And so I think of it as the collection of practices that help women stay, like you said it at the beginning of the episode, helps them maintain a big, full life while also having the freedom to enjoy it, right? It's a both and there is a skill set or a collection of practices that helps to enable that because most women in those peak years are feeling so much tension between their ambition, like just call it what it is, and the demands of their family life. The tension between those two is like it's just breaking them in the middle. And I'm trying to reset the balance among those three things: your professional ambition, the pull of your family, like the gravitational pull of your family, and the need to protect some space for yourself to be a human in the midst of all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel it. I'm there right now.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You are living at the peak.
I'm in the peak. Yeah. Where you're trying to figure out how can I still be me, be fully in myself, not burn out, and also feel like I don't suck at everything. Right. How can I feel like I'm being a good mom, I'm being a good wife, I'm being a good businesswoman, I'm able to give enough of myself to all of the things that I'm passionate about, which are all of those things in my life.
Right.
And it's sometimes it's not always hard, and we can be really hard on ourselves about it and finding those skills that we're ambitious women. So you work with a lot of us. What are the most common patterns you see when women come to you feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that is probably the most broadly seen is that they're not a human. Like they don't have human standards that apply to them, right? They've somehow transcended human needs of like sleep and good food and daylight. That sort of abdication of self, of thinking like, I'll just take care of me later, is the first thing to go. And I think it's a problem of naivete, really. I think it happens a little earlier stage in this. I think later in the peak, women start to really get it. Oh, if I don't level set on some of this stuff, I'm not going to make it. It is the path to burnout. But truly those practices, I think of them as resilience rituals that allow women to bear a greater load of stress without breaking under the pressure of it, are so foundational. It is widespread to ignore or underserve those things. So I think that's a really big one. I think tools to manage the mental load that come with this chapter of life is so prevalent as to be cliched that there is a mental load. We're not going to say there's not. There is. It's significant. And I think, but there's a lot of self-blame and self-loathing around like, why can't I? And the reality is because it is a ridiculous expectation that you would keep all of this in your head. So tools around managing that. I think the calendar chaos that comes with this stage is so prevalent. There are so many people's calendars. I mean, you have more than mine, right? I have 3 children and a spouse and my own and a team of multiple people. And I see all of their calendars all the time. And I have 2 parents who are thankfully still alive and live close by. That's a lot of calendar chaos. And so managing to have a level of control over that and decision-making, that's a skill that has to be built. And then I think emotional regulation. I think our ability to stay grounded and emotionally centered when there are a lot of people's roller coasters, right? Taking us on the ride with them. them, and learning that we can stand at the base of the roller coaster and not necessarily get on the ride is a really important skill in this season if we want to kind of keep our sanity. So those are some of the biggest.
I love that. Yeah. Not react and don't react. Don't overreact to anything. That's sort of the only way I can have 5 kids and a husband is, okay, observe their emotional states and not really react to it. It's kind of learning to hold that back.
Responsible for solving for them. Like, I think we take so much responsibility for solving everyone else's problems of all kinds, including their emotional challenges, and just learning that they're learning those skills, and we can support and witness, to your point, observe without having to bear the responsibility of solving for it. That's kind of revolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely. And on my show, we talk a lot about invisible labor, the mental load we carry at home and at work. How do you see that showing up in your coaching practice?
I mean, it's omnipresent, right? Again, I think it's foundational to some of the self-criticism that can quickly elevate to shame that women are carrying around is, why can't I carry all of this in my head and get it all done? And I think we just don't have mechanisms for where to put it, how to get an assist where we need it, how to sort of establish a remote brain that we don't have to carry everything around in our own. And there are kind of hard skills there that we're just not taught. So coaching, it shows up a lot of I think in my coaching practice, it's less therapy style and more equipping. I'm really pragmatic, and I want women to have solutions that they can walk out and apply. So we spend a lot of time talking about how do you lower that mental load and make it more manageable, and what are the actual tools and practices that do that.
Nice. So applying systems around these things, better systems, management systems.
Yes, 1,000%.
Around the invisible work.
Around all of it. Yeah. And I think, I have this little phrase that I think has become, I don't know where I picked it up. It's widespread now, but to just, when something's not working, to double click on it, right? Just to pause and say, hold on. Instead of just continuing to go on this way and complaining about how hard it is and how it's not working, let's just stop for a second and sort of diagnose what is really going on here, and then re-engineer, is there a better way to approach this ongoing? And it's wild how often the solution's right there. As soon as we take a few minutes to just get underneath it, there's a solution, and we can kind of move forward with a better way. And I feel like that happens every day inside of conversations with clients and in my own household.
And we're seeing such a big transformation with technology right now too. So there's a lot more every day. It seems like there's a new tool that we could rely on to automate some of this invisible labor.
Sure. I mean, the LLMs alone, right? I mean, just using Claude or using Chat to say okay, I'm going to equip an agent to do these things for me. I mean, we just didn't have it a few years ago. Even programming, I was saying to someone on my team today, programming that I released a few years ago, it's completely outdated. I mean, it needs to completely be revised and refreshed to be relevant today, because I would be underserving the tools that are available now that just weren't there.
Yeah. I mean, I love that we have the calendars that we have, like having a Google Calendar where you can integrate with everybody in the family. That helps a lot. It really does.
Toggling things on and off.
Yeah, on and off. And I have multiple calendars too, so that I can put stuff on my work calendar so my husband doesn't have to see certain things, and it's not, so the calendars don't get congested, making sure you're doing calendar management, basically.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Because that way you can still see what you're doing. But I think technology and women and the digital revolution that we're in right now is going to have a huge impact on women in the way that we elevate and automate.
I think so too. And I think, my caution to listeners is, and just to women in general in my community, is I think we have to be careful that we don't fall prey to the tropes, right? Of just throwing up our hands and being like, oh, it's going so fast and I don't understand it. You just can't. This is not one that you can sit out, right? I think a lot of women got trained during the social media evolution of oh, maybe I can sit this one out. Maybe I don't need to do the next platform. And I think that was true. In social media, for sure, there were entire eras that it was fine to sit out. This is not that one. I would be real careful about getting too far behind in what the AI tools can do for us, because if you're not using them and not figuring out use cases that are relevant to your career and to your household, you will not keep up. That's just an imperative. And so I think I'm an evangelist about that at this point.
I love that. I recently joined the board of the National Association of Women in AI. And Nawai's mission is to help equip women with the tools to use AI, because of the wage gap that already exists.
That's right.
If we don't adapt and adopt this technology, the gap is going to get further and further between men and women. And we're already seeing CEO level women who are getting fired because they don't have AI skills.
That's right.
So this is big mission for me, is to make sure that we don't sleep on this one. We need to embrace it. It's not going anywhere. Even don't be afraid of the robots taking over the world. Be afraid of being left behind in the past.
Yes. And I think especially when you think about women who still more often than men take time out of the workforce, right? Let's just use maternity leave as an example, or any other kind of caregiving leave. The pace of change is so radical that, I mean, I took 3-year-long maternity leaves in my earlier adulthood. If I would have been out for the last year, I mean, the world, I remember I left and nobody had a BlackBerry. And I came back and everybody had a BlackBerry. And I was like, what happened? I mean, right, that was a long time ago. But now, a year, if I had been out and not keeping up with the curve, I mean, it's just, the pace is wild. So I think it's great that you're doing that work, and I'm anxious to hear what comes out of it.
Yeah, it's just, I couldn't be more of a proponent for women embracing this technology. It's so important. And as we learn to have brilliant balance in our lives, technology is going to be a big part of that, I think.
It is. It is. It's an enabler, right? And maybe like levels the playing field to some extent. I think women have complained for a long time about, my husband doesn't do this and I'm just the only one who sees it. And I keep saying, like, you have a digital brain, a digital assistant now that can bear some of that for you. Also, that can play the intermediary between you and your partner on providing direction, translating from what's in your head to what you need them to be able to keep up with and do. Like, there's really a lot of use cases.
Absolutely. No, you're so right. You could use that calendar also to show him all of the things that you're doing that maybe he didn't see before. But I think that was one of the big things in our house, was I don't think he really saw all the things I was doing because I was culturally programmed to do them so quietly. So like a little fairy, and I think that so many of us are that way. So, but it's kind of nice if you're looking for your partner to be a partner. A lot of times they just need to see what's actually going on and, take the magic away and show them the reality of the household life so that they can meet you where you need them to be. But one of the things that I've learned from hosting my podcast is that when you talk to enough high-performing women, you start noticing patterns. From all the interviews you've done on Brilliant Balance podcast, what are some of the most interesting mindset shifts or concepts you've learned from your guests?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the things that I think I see over and over again is perfectionism as a pattern. I think a lot of us who were high achievers, sort of deemed extraordinary early on, which is often the audience that we're kind of rolling with, those women really developed that exceptionality through perfectionism. And it's worded early in life, right? You have nothing to manage but yourself. And so you can do it with a level of exactitude that just doesn't translate as you're kind of climbing that complexity curve. And so I think that the women who successfully shift to the peak, who like really are bearing that stage of life well, have learned imperfect action, right? How do I get out of the starting gates without having everything being perfectly set? And also sort of like definition of enough. What is good enough in certain areas of my life so that I can put the full force of my talent against the most essential things, and I can let other things be good enough for now. And by the way, that can vacillate over time. The shift out of perfectionism into sort of this variable level of like even excellence that's required, I think is something that the women who seem to be carrying the biggest lives and having the most success have been really, really skilled at doing. And it's not natural because you're letting go of something that's become like an identity marker in order to do that, but it's really powerful.
I can see that. I can absolutely see that. Our family motto is when good enough will do. And I think that having a mom who kind of has always been able to jump into imperfect action modeled that behavior. So I think that's part of my resilience. Part of my success has come from my ability to I'm really not a perfectionist. I think I come off as one, but I think I'm actually okay with being okay. Just okay. Okay. If I can do it okay enough.
I don't know you well, but you seem like somebody who's into breadth. Like I want to get a lot of things done. I'm sort of multi-passionate. And again, what maybe like inherently comes with that is I can't be that deep and kind of like tweaking any one thing overly to have that big of a life, that much breadth. But when people try, I think this is the really important insight where women get to burnout or get crushed is trying to maintain that standard that kind of got them there. Like the thing that was effective in the climb as they're kind of like building, acquiring promotions and adding that, you have to lay that skill down and develop a new one to really crest the curve. And I just don't think we do it organically.
I think you're so right. 100%. I see it all the time. I see it with the women on my show who've burnt out, the ones who've like had to make huge pivots in their lives. A lot of times it comes from perfectionism and like the inability to delegate or that over control, an inability to let go of control of things. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like you get to a point in your life where there's too many things to control that you really can't do it all by yourself.
Yeah. And I think the control, I don't know how you see this, but the women that I'm most often with, the control is like a symptom of caring. They care a lot about everything. And they don't always trust that other people will care as much. And so when you have high care, low trust, you can't release it. So really sometimes it's more about learning to build trust or surrounding yourself with people that are really that are excellent, that you do trust, that allows you to release the control. I'm not going to release control at all to somebody I don't think is competent. So putting yourself around people where there's a lot of competence can really be the bridge that helps you learn that skill.
Oh, that's such a good point, Cherylanne. That's been my biggest thing in life is I surround myself with highly competent people because I delegate a lot because it's the only way I can do everything I do. Right. So yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Who are some of the most influential women you've had on your show that really left a lasting impression on you?
So I love each and every person who's been on the show. We've had guest coaches inside of the Brilliant Balance community. The first person who always comes to mind when I think about that, like my guest, is Catherine Morgan Schaffler. She wrote a book called The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control. Catherine's not as well known as some of the other people that I've had on the show, but the work that she did through that book is so exceptional. And the conversation that I had with her was so powerful and really like mind-opening to not just to me, but to all the women in our community, that she's really a standout. I had a great conversation with Martha Beck when she released her work on integrity and like the path to integrity. That was a really exceptional conversation. I had a great conversation with Jill Bolte Taylor on her work after her stroke. The work is called My Stroke of Insight, and just a brilliant mind that had an insight after a stroke. I mean, do you know her work?
I do not.
So it's unbelievable. She is a physician who, I think she's a neuroscientist who had a stroke and was able to ascertain what was happening to her in real time because she had the training, but also lost her complete left brain functionality. So she came out of her stroke entirely right brain, like no language, no processing, no reason, and it took years of recovery work to get it back, and is now back, speaking and writing and doing all the things. Absolutely fascinating story. She was one of the great, I could go on I've been doing the podcast for 7 or 8 years. I have lots and lots of really great interviews, but those are a few standouts.
That's amazing. It's one of the best parts about being a podcaster, I think, is meeting these and getting these incredible stories and having this knowledge transfer.
I just thought of another one I have to say is Dawn Musalem. Her story of what she has lived through and survived is so ridiculous and remarkable. And the work that she's doing in healthcare is phenomenal. I think she was at the Mayo Clinic, but I think she's just changed to another location. She's another one of those people, I will probably only meet a handful of people in my life ever who are like her, who have this kind of frequency that they're vibrating at. She is remarkable. Really a remarkable human.
What is her work center around?
So it's really centered around health and wellness and taking exceptional care of yourself so that you don't end up in some of these health crises. Cancer prevention is a big piece of it. She's just remarkable. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the business side of podcasting, because a lot of women listening are curious about this world. So you've been podcasting, 6 or 7 years?
7 or 8 years.
7 or 8 years. And it looks glamorous from the outside, but we know that there's a lot of work behind the scenes. So have you ever had a moment where you thought about giving up?
No. Not in the podcast.
Amazing.
Yeah, the podcast is one of my favorite parts of the things I do. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I love it so much. I would say there were phases over those years where I was dealing with a level of personal crisis in my family that challenged the discipline that I have around the podcast. I've produced an episode every week, just one episode a week, but every week for those years. And I write all of them myself. I have a lot of solo episodes. They are not all interviews. And I think solo episodes carry their own weight because you have a creative burden in a solo episode that you don't have in an interview. And they're hard for different reasons. So that was difficult. And I had to dig myself out of a ditch a few times with you know what? It is okay to air an encore episode that you've aired before to get yourself through through a difficult week, like a little bit of self-compassion, but I genuinely love the format of podcasting. And I have a great team around me. I think people can't picture like what happens in a podcast. You and I do them a little bit differently, but I deliver a raw audio file to a production team that takes it from there. So all of the bells and whistles and cutting excerpts out and getting show notes done and, distributing it to all the platforms, like I don't do that work. So I get to do the part of it that I love, which is create the content, record the episode or have the interview, and then sort of step aside and let my team go from there. And that is a very important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, definitely. I always say you got to stay in your realm of genius. Yeah. Why reinvent the wheel if someone else is better at doing it? That's just a business philosophy of mine. Like, I don't edit. I'm not good at that. I don't enjoy doing that. I hire that out. And then I have a social media guy that we have created an AI integration for social media. And, of course, automate it.
Right. But I think that it's, again, what was attractive to me about podcasting is I was blogging for years before podcasting. And, I'm a decent writer. I like writing. I'm probably going to be doing more writing soon. I really did like it, but it's a labor. Writing a piece that you're really going to polish is laborious. I am verbally gifted, right? It is not hard for me to string sentences together that like come out of my mouth the way I want them to. So podcasting was a really natural forum for me because I'm not stressed about having to talk to someone or talk to a microphone. In fact, it's easier, right? Because I'm not overthinking it the way I might do in writing. And so for me, the shift from blogging to podcasting actually felt like help. Now, I did not want to do video, and I was really resistant to doing anything on video. And that took a while. My podcast producer teases me all the time because he's like, holy God, you did not want to get on camera. I was like, I know. But I think that sort of if you think about writing to audio to video, it was a progression. It all kind of took some time to unfold, but we're there.
I love that. Yeah. Cause I came from a production background. So for me, when I was talking to a business coach and I was just starting to write my first book. And I said, I really want to have a podcast. And she's like, well, have a podcast. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to have a podcast. How do you have a podcast? And for me, it was, well, you could do just audio files or you could do audio and video. And I'm like, well, I definitely do video because I don't know how to do audio. I went to film school. So I came from like visual medium side of the world. And I'm like, okay, well, I could do that. That's sort of like making a documentary like every week.
Yes. Yeah, very frequent documentary. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, I can figure that out. Yeah. But here's a good question. How does your podcast fit into your overall business model today?
I would say it is the free front door. I think we have a large audience of podcast listeners who will probably never pay $1 to Brilliant Balance as a client. And I think they'll be very well served by the content. But it's like sometimes I describe it as like, I put out a lot of really good ingredients. Here's all of these good, healthy ingredients. But I'm really not talking in the podcast about like how to turn them into a meal or how to create a meal plan or how to string that together, right, toward a particular objective. So the podcast gives me a little bit more freedom to go to adjacent ideas from like the core teachings of Brilliant Balance. And then it feeds into the sort of paid services from the company because people who fall in love with the podcast or who become loyal listeners can kind of build trust over time. They get to know me. Do we vibe? Do they think the way I think? Do they think they could learn something from me? And if they do, then we have ways for them to sort of take the next step of that process. And so, but the podcast, at least so far, has always been like the free front door resource. And I think it's a great discovery channel. It's really easy for people to share with a friend or a colleague. And they do often. Like it's something that I think happens fairly regularly, which is cool.
And are you able to monetize it any other way? Are you able to make enough money from the coaching business that the coaching business covers the cost of the podcast? Do you have sponsorships or partnerships or anything?
We've done sponsorships from time to time over the years. Currently, we are not running sponsors. It's something that I kind of wrestle back and forth with and consider a lot. But right now, it is not the primary business model. Right now, it feeds the others.
Nice. And we already talked about your production process. You just make the audio file and hand it off.
That's right.
And I love that. And it's all about having a team that helps you out.
Absolutely.
Did you always do it this way or
from day one? From day one. I was in a mastermind at the time that I was considering starting a podcast with somebody who happened to be a podcast producer. And cool. I was like, well, I know him. This is where we're going to start. And we're still there. So it really was like, I did not want to have to go evaluating production teams and looking for it. And because of that, they sort of pulled me through a process of getting the overall initial setup from a, technology stack to like, here's a process for delivering files. I didn't know how to do I just didn't know what systems to use to do any of that. And so I found it very helpful right from the beginning.
Oh yeah, especially like 7 or 8 years ago. It's not like you
Right.
could just go to Chat GPT and say like, how do I start a podcast? Like I did.
That didn't exist. And none of these tools did. Riverside, Zencaster, like I don't think any of them were out there. So I started doing it in like GarageBand on a Mac. That's what I was recording in with no video, obviously. But it was great sound editing. If I had a good microphone and GarageBand, like they could sound edit really well out of that. And, we just had Google Sheets for like tracking the episode plan and what was coming and sharing files for approval back and forth. Like it worked, right? And then, everything as the kind of technology evolved in this ecosystem, we've just sort of gone along for the ride.
That's amazing. And you're shooting in... Are you still shooting on Zoom or are you in Riverside?
So I'm shooting in Zencaster.
Zencaster, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yep. And then we're able to move. So actually, I think when you and I talked, I hadn't even figured out how to do guests in Zencaster. And that's the latest evolution is that, it does just like Riverside.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love Riverside, but as technology is evolving, so are the platforms. Yeah. So it's like you kind of have to go along for the ride with them as, Riverside's integrating more AI. We're seeing a longer buffering time that we're not used to. So I'll send a file to my editor, think it's there. And he's like, it's still spinning. I'm like,
Like, hurry up. I know.
Okay. So learning curves still, as technology is evolving so quickly, there's just a lot of learning curves with even the podcasting world, all the things. So for women who are listening, who might be thinking about starting a podcast, what advice would you give them before they record their first episode?
Well, I would pay forward the same advice that I was given by Jonathan that many years ago, 7 or 8, I think it was 8 years ago. And it was to be able to write down 100 angles of content around like the epicenter of your show. So, whatever your show is going to be about, if you're listening today and you're like, I'm going to start a show about this topic, if you can't come up with 100 episode angles, you probably don't have a show. So really think about, do I want to talk about this for like years to come? I think that's a really important thing, that you don't sort of run out of angles or things to say or people to interview if it's an interview-based show, as many of them are now. And I think the second thing is to pick sort of the first 10 or so, 10, 12, 8, that sort of function as a unit. And I thought this was really good advice. He was like, look, let's do 12 episodes. And if you never do another one, that can live forever as kind of a marketing vehicle for your company, right? You have sort of some of your signature idea. And I will tell you this, anyone can go listen to the first 12 episodes I did and you can see it. It's like, it's a unit of teaching of some of the core like beliefs or thoughts or values that I still to this day go back and coach on and teach from. Now, it was 8 years ago. I've evolved, thinking has evolved, but I really think there's something to that idea of like, if you're just trying to make it worthwhile, can you do 10 or 12 that would function as a standalone, almost like mini series, right? And then you always have it. It's just something that can be out in the universe forever, even if you don't stick with recording the show forever and ever. Amen.
That's like the best advice ever. I love that.
It was really
Cherylanne.
solid.
That is
Paying
really
it forward.
Solid advice. I love that, because this is, this is a platform that does just go on and on and on. Like you don't just record it and it goes out that one week and that's it. It's like you put it out that week and it's out there forever.
And people are discovering, I don't know, when you look at your statistics, I mean, when we look at our listening stats, what people listen to in any given week is not the show I sent that week. It's all the stuff that search led them to. So you get this array of listenership across your archives that's really important to be aware of. It's not just what am I saying this week? Yeah, there's a big surge in current content, but there's so many people who are working their way through archives or finding their way through search to a particular episode, and that's their entry point. So everything has to serve as an entry point to your show.
Absolutely. That's great advice too. And if you were starting a podcast today, knowing everything that you know now, what would you do differently? Is there anything you'd do differently?
I would do interviews way sooner. So I waited years to start doing interviews. They were all solo episodes. Interviews are so compelling to listen to, right? We all love to listen to a conversation. It's very like voyeuristic to hear what they're talking about. I would have started that earlier. I'd still to this day probably need more of a mix toward interviews from solo episodes. I think they're just so energizing. And I think there's an era of me interviewing people where I feel like I was trying to pull their talking points out of like their book or their core teaching, right? And it really is much more interesting to have a conversation that's like they haven't had that conversation before, right? No one has ever asked me, by the way, about podcasting. Like that's like the first time I've ever done a podcast interview about my experience as a podcaster. Like you just did it. You modeled it of like, what do I think my audience will care about that this person can bring credibility to? And I think those are some of the best interviews is like there's a discussion happening that's a little bit behind the scenes and what's this person's life like, and then really core connected to like, where's our intersectionality? I think that's something that I'm still kind of figuring out. But I think it makes for some of the best interviews.
Well, thanks for that compliment. That's really nice of you. Well, I just thought, we are entrepreneurs, we're women. And so I'm sure I actually meet a lot of women who are like, oh, I want to have a podcast. What does that entail? Would you help me produce it? All the kinds of questions like that. And as podcasters have some insight, but I feel like I know a little bit, you know a little bit more. So if we as women start just sharing and having these kinds of conversations, we can help other women, avoid pitfalls and
just find the courage to start, right? I mean, so much of it is, I was talking to a former client today in like a catch-up call, and she said she wanted to do something. And I was like, well, you could, start a TikTok channel and do this. And I went through this whole like little quick, it's so, right? There's like nothing stopping you. There's no barriers to entry. Like that's what came out of my mouth. And she goes, except fear. and I was like, right, that's the thing. And so I think if you and I can it's really not that hard, right? The ability to get into the barriers to entry are so low to start a podcast or start a TikTok channel or whatever you want to do. I think like we manufacture so much fear about how hard it must be. And I sound like Elle Woods, like what? Like it's hard? It's not, it's just not. So I think if we can debunk that a bit, we'll probably get more people out of the starting blocks.
Heck yeah. Yeah. It's the scariest part about starting a podcast was the starting a podcast part of being okay with being a voice and sharing my voice. And even the book, like writing the book was easy, but the day that we published, the day my book went live on Amazon, I literally thought I was going to die. Like it was this most terrifying. And I've done big things. It was terrifying. And it was kind of the same with the podcast, but I kind of produce and then I don't observe it too much. I just let it go and do its thing. And I try not to.
Oh, I never listen to them. Yeah.
Yeah. I really try to distance myself from the outcome and just be on the journey of it and try to stay in that mindset of this is the adventure. I'm going to enjoy the moment that I get to be with my guest and share this insight and go and find these answers to these questions together and have these amazing high-level conversations. And then it's just out in the universe. Exactly. I release it, the outcome of it.
I agree. And you hear people talk about that. Like, I think that probably women listening have heard in various kind of angles of the entertainment industry, people talk about not reading the comments or not watching their movies if they produce them. But I really think it's important that you've produced a quality piece of work. And there's probably a cadence of listening to your own work to see where can you get better. I realized I said the word right a lot, and I would really like to get that out of my cadence of speaking. And it's because I heard someone else be interviewed that was really credible, but he said right about every fifth word. And I thought to myself, I'm going to go back and listen to a couple of things and see if I have anything. And I thought, oh no, there it is. So you have to hear yourself to hear, do you have anything that's coming out regularly that you want to get rid of? But not every episode, and not reading every comment, and not wondering why this one didn't land, because there's always some crazy stupid thing that happened that has nothing to do with you that can get in the way of the statistics. So you can really just whip yourself into a frenzy unnecessarily. But I think we should always be trying to get better at our craft, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was funny, but my first couple of episodes, my father is a big fan of my show. Aww. And he said, I forget what he said. You got to give them, don't say, don't say. So I go back now and I'm like, okay. So now when I'm a lot more cautious about how I respond and, holding space and making sure that there's space for edits too.
That's right.
Taking time with the words.
Podcasters have to learn not to verbally respond to each other. This is something I hear when I'm being interviewed is I'm speaking and they want to give me verbal reinforcement because that's what we do in conversation. But you learn as a podcaster to give nonverbal head nod reinforcement, okay sign silently because it's going to get picked up and then they have to edit you out that the other person's audio be clean. There are some of those more, I would call them advanced best tricks of the trade that you learn over time, for sure.
That is, yeah, that was the big one for me, was the nuance of the medium. Definitely the nuance of the medium, making sure that I wasn't stepping on other people
while they're trying to talk. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So this will be the rapid fire section. Why are so many high achieving women the most exhausted people in the room?
Because they don't know how to say no.
Ooh. What's one myth women have been told about having it all?
I think you can. I know. The myth they've been told about having it all is, I guess, that it's possible.
What's the biggest mistake ambitious women make when trying to balance career and family?
Forgetting about themselves in the middle of it.
What does a truly balanced life look like in real life, actually, not just on Instagram?
It's different for everyone.
So good. So true. Well, Cherylanne, this has been such a thoughtful conversation. I love how your work reminds women that balance isn't about perfection. It's about intentionally designing a life that supports who you are and what matters most. And I think so many women listening today will feel both seen and empowered by this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on the Manager Podcast. Where can everyone follow your work and listen to Brilliant Balance podcast?
The Brilliant Balance website, which is brilliant-balance.com, or you can Google Brilliant Balance and you'll usually go straight to it.
Awesome. You're the best. Thank you so, so much for being on the show. It's always a pleasure talking to you. You're amazing.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.